Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as medical, investment, or financial advice. We do not sponsor or endorse any of the individuals, companies, products, or services featured on this podcast. Any statements or opinions expressed are of the individual who makes them. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Prime Life Podcast. We've got a great show lined up for you today, but before we get to that, let's check in with the co-hosts. Laura, how are you doing today?
Hey, Joseph, I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here and for today's conversation.
It's always great to see you and have you on the show. Mary, how are you doing?
I am doing very well. So thank you for asking. I'm delighted to be with all of you and very excited to introduce our guest.
So let's get right into it. Please introduce our guest and the topic.
Thanks, Joseph. So today on Prime Life Podcast, we welcome Michael Connelly. He's the former CEO of Mercy Health and has 40 years of experience in health system management. More recently, he wrote a book, The Journey's End, an investigation of death and dying in modern America. What a topic we have today. Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about your journey into where you are today with your career and why you decided to write a book like this.
Well, I'll start with the most important and work my way down. I've been married for 48 years to my high school sweetheart. I have 3 children and 2 boys and a girl, and I have 4 grandkids. So I actually started working in a hospital at 16 years of age and was a groundskeeper, security guard, orderly, and I fell in love with the hospital. I thought it was a microcosm of the world. You had every kind of person. You had every strata of society all on one campus interacting with each other. And my dad always wanted me to be a lawyer. And so there was a bit of a conflict there. And so I solved the conflict by becoming a lawyer and going into healthcare. And but I only practiced briefly. Thought I was advising people not to do things because there were risks, and I said I'd rather spend my life doing things. So that's how I stayed in healthcare. I would say that my healthcare career has been very robust. I've been all over the country. I've managed just about everything you can think of that's involved with healthcare. So I've been involved with medical education. I've been involved with large hospitals. I've been in large systems. I've been in insurance companies, long-term care. But back in 1981, I actually served on the board of a hospice. And that was actually before Medicare was even part of hospice. And I came to believe that the model of care in hospice was one of the best care models in all of healthcare. And so I've watched it evolve. I've watched healthcare evolve. And I've spent my career trying to innovate. And I have to say I have had very little success in making some of the changes meaningfully that I'd like. So that's my background. And why I wrote the book is I thought this was the biggest problem in healthcare today. And I thought that healthcare itself would get reformed if we reformed how we dealt with end-of-life care.
Michael, it sounds like you've lived the true American dream of working your way up from security guard or groundskeepers or whatever that first job was all the way to the C-suite. Tell us a little bit about the book, The Journey's End. What's it about? What are you covering? What are you hoping the messages that people take away?
So the first point I like to make is that the older you get, the more you're going to use healthcare. It's inevitable. And understanding how healthcare works and what you're using is a good idea. So the book helps you understand how healthcare thinks. And you have to decide if you want to think the way they think. Because for them, dying is failure. And in old age, I would argue that dying is not failure. And so it goes into looking at why healthcare doesn't want to talk about death. It is. I just read a quote today that I thought was relevant. It was that many things matter, but some things really matter, and that reference was to this topic. That symptoms, diagnosis, treatments matter. But understanding what your life is about and what you're trying to achieve at end of life is a more important question. And it influences how you get treated because the treatments decline in their effectiveness and they increase in their burden. And so continuing treatment is oftentimes at end of life much worse than just not having it.
In your experience, have you found that there's a lot of potential misconceptions or potential, say, misinformation, but maybe it's not enough of the right information out there when people are going through these decisions and journeys?
And we'll get that answer after a brief word from our commercial sponsors.
NASA is always working harder to be your carrier of choice. We offer insurance products that can help you meet your retirement goals, such as protecting your savings, securing lifetime income, or paying for healthcare costs. We're dedicated to providing best-in-class service and are keeping things simple, and we'll have your back. We have around 400,000 policyholders and contract holders and have been doing this for a long time, 170 years, but we remain humble enough to always try to improve. For more information, visit nfg.com. Nassau insurance products are issued by Nassau Life and Annuity Company of Hartford, Connecticut, Nassau Life Insurance Company, East Greenbush, New York, or Nassau Life Insurance Company of Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas. Subsidiaries of Nassau Financial Group. Products are not available in all areas. Policyholder counts are for all Nassau companies as of September 30th, 2022, and are subject to change.
Coverite is the first digital concierge health insurance platform focused on Medicare. Their mission is to make Medicare more transparent and accessible for America's 60 million Medicare beneficiaries. By simplifying a traditionally confusing and complex decision, Coverite delivers a simple, seamless, and hassle-free plan selection and enrollment experience. Try the Coverite platform and see for yourself why they've been referred to as the TurboTax for Medicare. Visit coverite.com/podcast to learn more.
It's an excellent question. My book is about education. So what I'm trying to do is educate you as an individual, and then I'm also trying to educate healthcare providers. And so the biggest problem is that we're all afraid of death. And so there's a whole lot of psychology around that issue that I discuss in the book. But that plays out in lots of different ways. The doctor doesn't want to bring it up. You don't want to bring it up. Family doesn't want to bring it up. So we never talk about it. The second dilemma is that healthcare does not pay for conversation. And that's sort of a revelation to most people. But all of healthcare is paid through a coding system. And that coding system doesn't know how to code a conversation. And therefore, we have basically eliminated. So you hear about fragmented care and people siloed. And well, that's because doctors don't have time to talk to you, and they don't have time to talk to each other because the payment system doesn't pay for it. And that is a huge problem. But I have solutions for those in the book. So and so what you don't learn about is palliative care and hospice. You just don't learn about those things. And even if you do learn about them, while hospice is easy to get to, palliative care is not. But understanding how to make choices requires palliative care. So just a simple example would be if you have any terminal illness, before you go to the oncologist, the nephrologist, or the cardiac surgeon, I would first suggest you talk to a palliative care doctor because they will give you an objective perspective on what is it you want for the rest of your life and what are you likely to experience. Whereas the expert in the field is focusing on fixing whatever that problem is. But there could be a price to be paid for getting fixed. And whether you want that price requires some reflection.
So that's very interesting, and I've never heard that. And I have a comment first and then a question. So my husband's mother, she wasn't my mother-in-law ever because she passed away before we got married, and it was 30 years ago and she had cancer. And I remember him saying at one point, and it kind of broke my heart, that he wished the doctors had stopped treating her when they realized she wasn't going to live, because it was horrifying for him to watch her continue to suffer, and they continued to give her treatment. So I remember that it's like it was yesterday. And that's my comment and my thought. My question is, why don't most people know about this? Do you think that because, like, I don't know, I'm just going to say this, like, if I were given a diagnosis, my first thought is, I want to fight this to the end. I want to beat this. So do you think it's that inclination, or is it a combination? I know you said in your book you have solutions, but I would love to hear more about that.
So part of what you're dealing with is, I call it the lotto mentality. When it comes to dying, you grasp at straws. You want to fight to the end. That is the American way. And so people don't want to talk about probabilities. People don't want to talk about the fact that the pain and suffering that the treatment is going to initiate. You know, for example, people get all excited about going into advanced trials to find a cure. Well, most people don't understand that a trial is not designed to find the cure necessarily. It's designed to see how much you can tolerate of the treatment. How far can we push the human body with chemotherapy? And it could be awful, and it's highly unlikely to work. And so what you're really signing up for is the lotto. And so if you think about it that way, it changes maybe whether you want to fight to the end. What I'm trying to argue in the book is that in old age, we should not all be wanting to fight to the end. We should want to focus on being a meaningful human being and accepting life, accepting the reality that we're not going to live forever. And that's a hard thing to do. I mean, you know, my daughter was talking about my book to somebody recently, and the couple had a 93-year-old grandfather who was still active and burgeoning, and he was like still concerned about going to the dentist to get his teeth whitened. And, you know, they're going, why is he getting his teeth whitened at 93? You got nice white teeth there, Mary. And it's so I'm all in favor of that. If that's what you want, fine. But there's a lot of genetics going on here. And, some people are going to live to 100 and some are not. And it's knowing when to say no more. And only you can decide that. But you have to better understand what's going to happen if you don't say no more.
Michael, I know why he's getting his teeth whitened. He's got an active social life. He's got to look good.
I think that's great.
It's awesome.
So does his dentist.
So I just want to take it back one quick step. But before I do, you mentioned earlier dying is failure in the medical world. And I think that's probably true for, depending on where people are in the life cycle, right? Like if there's a 30-year-old with cancer and the person dies, that's horrible, it's terrible, it's tragic. And they failed mostly for lots of reasons, we could talk about another time. But like you said, right, someone who's in their 80s, 90s or later, you want to have a quality of life that matches your personal wishes. But so I just want to clarify that because it's not, everything is not failure, right? I think that's really what you're saying.
Well, I am saying that. So what happens when you become specialized is that you look at the world from that specialized point of view. So I'm going to kill that cancer. I'm going to fix that heart. I'm going to make that kidney pump. I'm going to, because I am trained. I spent all these years learning how to do this. And I can make a difference.
Okay.
And
so how
they aren't very sensitive to the consequences.
Yeah, so they're tunnel vision versus a more macro vision.
Yes.
So we've used some terms, and for people that may not know those terms, could you maybe just define the difference between palliative and what was the other one? You hospice and what they cover and what they don't cover?
All right. So this is an excellent question because this is part of the problem. The language is confusing. And so I will try to use a new term just to confuse us more, but it's a simpler term. So I would say there's comfort care and there's curative care. And whether you're opting for comfort care or curative care is sort of the direction we're trying to go. Now, curative care is treating whatever's wrong with you. Comfort care is stopping treatment and just, trying to make sure you don't have pain or suffer. And so the purpose of hospice is to say that you're no longer going to have curative care. Now, the decision to not have any curative care is a very difficult one. And a lot of people don't just want to turn it off. They would like to have some curative care and comfort care, and maybe as they go along decide which way they want to lean. And that's what I'm recommending in my book. Unfortunately, the insurance system and Medicare and the payment system do not allow that. And so hospice, in my opinion, is pretty much an insurance benefit. And it's an insurance benefit that says it requires a doctor to certify you're going to die in 6 months. And that is an impossible and unscientific suggestion. But that's the law. Consequently, doctors don't generally like to bring up hospice because they don't want to tell their patient, I think you're going to die in 6 months. So they generally offer it when there's like 2 weeks left. Now, palliative care is really the way of treating you when you're getting comfort care. But the big distinction in palliative care is that it does allow curative care. So a doctor that's in palliative care, if your insurance allows it, would give you some curative care if they felt it was beneficial. And I know that's all very complicated, but again, if you just go back to thinking about comfort care and curative care and your choices between those two, palliative care is actually a medical specialty, just like oncology, just like, and what would make palliative care work well if it was an outpatient service, where if you had a terminal illness, you could go see a palliative care doctor and get a consult. Unfortunately, it isn't paid for as an outpatient service in a way that makes it economically viable. And therefore, it's just a consult service in a hospital where when you're in ICU and dying and nobody can agree on what to do, they call in a palliative care consult to sort of help people understand why it's the best thing to, back off all this stuff. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah,
But
it's certainly helpful, and it's interesting too. When we were going through treatment with my husband's grandmother, and she was on hospice, she was off hospice. I was like, wait, hold on. I thought hospice was only when they were going to pass away. Like we don't know so much. So my question to you is, at what point in an individual's journey should they begin to educate themselves around this type of care, or these types of care, so they can be better informed whether they're making their own decisions or decisions with loved ones?
Now an ad from one of our sponsors. Remember when you could trust the news? Well, then check out Walter. Walter is the free, no-nonsense newsletter for grown-ups that comes to your inbox 3 times a week. From current trends, aging in place, travel, retirement, and everything in between, including a dash of pop culture trivia and throwbacks, Walter is a great way to start your mornings and to stay informed. Oh, and did we mention that it's free? Check us out at thisiswalter.com. Get smart. Get Walter.
So it's never too soon. But I mean, as a routine, I would think anybody that's 65 or older, whenever you have a major procedure to consider, and whether it's a quality of life thing, if I need my hip or knee and I want to be active, but, for example, I'm not going to ever get another colonoscopy. I mean, there's no way I want to. There's a beautiful book written by Barbara Einreich, she said, I'm old enough that I don't want to know about anything that I can't feel. And that sort of says it in a nutshell. And so there isn't an age at which this occurs, but at some point in your life, you have to evaluate it. And what I'm trying to emphasize is that a lot of the treatment offered is unlikely to work, but they feel compelled. I mean, the malpractice system makes them compelled to offer it because it could work. One of my best friends is an orthopedic surgeon.
Michael, sorry to interrupt, but they also get paid to run those tests and procedures.
Yes, I'm more sympathetic to the payment system is so outrageous that they, I mean, there are people that do that, but the vast majority don't. And but I lost track of where I was going. But so let's ask the next question. That's all right.
No, it's okay. I think that's on me. So you've said quite a bit, and I'm very interested in hearing more. So for those individuals that are starting to think about, what you've said, you're getting near 65 or you are 65, whatever that looks like. It's a lot to think about. Do you have a couple of first baby steps that people can take so they're not like, oh, I don't know about all that stuff and I'm worried. And sometimes people become immobilized when they get frightened or they're overwhelmed. So can you give us a couple of baby steps that are good first steps for individuals to think about or families?
Yes, I think that everyone in their 60s and beyond should have an advance directive. Every state has a model advance directive. You can go online and look them up. Unfortunately, they're not very helpfully written. And so there are great examples. There's something referenced in my book called the Compassion Protocol, and there's another, the Conversation Project. So they're all websites that would, you want to have a consumer-friendly version of your advance directive. My main advice on your advance directive is that it needs to be precise. So most of them will just have a box that says, I don't want extraordinary care. And a lot of people go, oh, good. I took care of it. I checked the box. Well, I got news for you. That means nothing to caregivers. It means nothing to a family member trying to decide on a treatment. So you need to be precise and say, I don't want DNR. Or I do want DNR. I don't want CPR. I don't want ICU. I don't want a breathing machine or a feeding tube. I don't want kidney dialysis. If you say those things explicitly, now you may not be ready to say those things. And so the next point of all this is that you should re-examine that document every year and ideally talk about it with your primary care physician. And, decide whether you want, like if I got cancer right now, I probably wouldn't get any treatment. It's just, it wouldn't be worth it, in my opinion. Now, that varies by what kind of cancer it is, da-da-da-da-da. But it is having a good understanding of what you want to do or not do. And that's what that document does. There's a second document that's called a health proxy. And that is finding an individual, because one of the other dilemmas here is that most of us at these moments will no longer be conscious. And we can't make our own decisions. And so if you leave it up to the health system, they will do everything. But if you have an empowered person and you've been explicit for them and with them, they can make decisions on your behalf. But that requires you to have an in-depth conversation with that person and to have them understand what you would prefer. So in my book, I have stories in every chapter that sort of go through these kind of events and how families dealt with them.
So, Michael, I have a question as we get sort of towards the end of this chit chat. You mentioned that some of these services are consultative and people don't know about them until later in life. Earlier you referenced doctors don't spend time because there's no code for recording conversations. So how do we fix this problem? I know we're not going to solve that in the next 2 minutes, but what are some things people can do or we should be thinking about as a population to resolve some of these issues so that people can live a better quality of life?
So that is a wonderful question. And healthcare is loaded with complex solutions. I have a simple fix to this problem. And that is that we pay primary care doctors a salary, like everybody else gets a salary. And it's paid for by the insurance company. and there is no coding for their care. Primary care is only 4.5% of all healthcare spending. So if I'm wrong, this is not a huge mistake. But I think it would make, because primary care doctors no longer even coordinate care. That used to be their primary responsibility. And right now they have no time for that. And so if we just changed how we pay, and I explain in detail, took me 2 years to write one chapter about this, why this is important and how it would work.
So as we get to the top of time here, I want to ask, and before I ask my last question, Mary, do you have any other questions or thoughts you'd like to share with Michael at this time?
I don't have any questions. I have a lot of thoughts. So I really appreciate you enlightening, at least me. There's so many things I did not know today about palliative care, and I'm very interested, and I have some homework to do. So thank you for that.
Love it. Joseph, any final questions or thoughts?
I think there's a ton of conversation here, but read the book, and reach out to Michael afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, we like to ask our guests the question where we hear your story, we learn about your background, we learn about the great work that you're doing, the impact you're having in the world at large. But we want to know from you, what is your why? Why do you wake up every day and do the work that you do?
Because I am very passionate about healthcare. I've spent my whole life devoted to healthcare, and I am so ashamed of how it works. I am literally ashamed of how it works. And I spent 5 years kind of reflecting on this issue. And what I came up with in my book is solutions. So I'm actually offering feasible solutions. And I honestly don't think either Congress or the healthcare system will be interested in the solutions. But I hope you are interested in the solutions, because I think it's going to take a consumer movement to get these changes, like I just suggested of souring primary care doctors. By the way, those doctors would love it.
Michael, thank you so much for your time today, and appreciate all your insights. It's been great having you, Mary and Laura. Great questions, great conversation. Everyone else, please tune in next week for another episode of the Prime Life Podcast. Until next time, have a great day.
Remember to subscribe to the Prime Life Podcast anywhere you find podcasts. You can find all of our episodes, contact information, and more on our website, primelifepodcast.com. Stay connected with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.